How did one stranded rifleman battle alone for 3 days, and why did what happened next surprise his commanders? The answer lies deep in the frozen Ardennes forest in Belgium during the brutal winter of 1944. Snow choked the pine-covered hills. Temperatures fell well below freezing. Visibility dropped to yards as fog and smoke clung to the ground like a living thing. This was the opening phase of the Battle of the Bulge, Germany's final major offensive on the Western Front. Under the code name Operation Wacht am Rhein, Adolf Hitler committed his last reserves in a desperate gamble to split Allied lines and force a negotiated peace. In the northern sector of the attack, German infantry from the 277th Volksgrenadier Division, supported by armor from the 1st SS Panzer Division, advanced toward the critical high ground of Elsenborn Ridge. If the ridge fell, American artillery positions would be overrun, supply roads would be exposed, the northern shoulder of the Allied line would collapse. Standing in the path of that advance, unnoticed, isolated, and completely alone, was one American rifleman. For 72 hours, he would fight behind enemy lines. For 3 nights, he would endure cold, hunger, and relentless pursuit. And when the fighting finally ended, even senior officers would struggle to believe what he had done. Little did they know, what happened next would become legendary.
The defense of this sector fell to the U.S. 99th Infantry Division, the Checkerboard Division. Positioned east of Elsenborn Ridge, the division held a wide and dangerously thin front through dense forest and broken terrain. The men of the 99th were relatively new to combat, but they were well trained. They dug deep foxholes into frozen earth, sighted their weapons along snow-covered fire lanes, and prepared to hold their ground. Opposing them were hardened German formations. The 277th Volksgrenadier Division had been rebuilt with experienced Eastern Front veterans. Its battalions were equipped with MG-42 machine guns, 81mm mortars, and increasing numbers of STG-44 assault rifles, weapons ideal for close forest fighting. On December 16th, German artillery shattered the silence before dawn. Thousands of shells crashed into American positions. Telephone wires were cut. Radio contact failed. Entire companies were thrown into confusion. Amid this chaos was Private First Class Daniel Reeves, age 22, a rifleman with Company E, 394th Infantry Regiment, 99th Infantry Division. Reeves was not a hero by reputation. He was quiet, dependable, and unremarkable. Exactly the kind of soldier armies rely on, but history often forgets.
On the morning of December 17th, Reeves was assigned as a rear security rifleman during a fighting withdrawal near a frozen forest road east of Elsenborn Ridge. German infantry had begun infiltrating between American positions, slipping through gaps created by the artillery barrage. At approximately 0930 hours, Reeves' platoon was hit by sudden machine gun fire from concealed MG-42 positions. 2 men fell immediately. Mortar rounds followed, bursting among the trees with deafening force. As the platoon fell back under orders, Reeves attempted to cover the withdrawal. Then a second German element emerged from the flank. In minutes, the fight dissolved into chaos. When the firing finally faded, Reeves found himself alone. His unit had pulled back, the Germans had pushed forward, and the forest around him now belonged to the enemy.
By 1100 hours, Reeves had taken shelter in a shallow depression beneath snow-laden branches. From there, he observed movement through the trees. German infantry. Lots of them. They advanced in long, disciplined columns, platoons followed by platoons, moving west toward Elsenborn Ridge. Reeves counted carefully. More than 600 men. This was not a patrol. This was a battalion-sized advance.
Reeves checked his equipment. M1 Garand rifle. 6 N-block clips of ammunition, 3 fragmentation grenades, trench knife, 1 frozen canteen. He understood the situation immediately. If he tried to break through the German lines, he would likely be killed. If he stayed hidden, the battalion would reach the ridge unopposed. Only one option remained. He waited until the lead German scouts reached 200 yards. Then he fired. The crack of the Garand shattered the winter silence. A German soldier collapsed into the snow. Shouts erupted. Men dove for cover. MG-42s swung toward the tree line, spraying bullets through branches and bark. Reeves moved instantly. He crawled 50 yards downhill, took a new position, and fired again, dropping a machine gun assistant struggling to deploy his weapon. To the Germans, it appeared they had encountered a prepared American defensive position. They halted.
By 1400 hours, German commanders had deployed their battalion cautiously. Squads advanced by bounds. Mortar teams began probing the forest ahead. Officers studied maps and debated routes. Reeves exploited every second. He fired from one position, then another. He rolled grenades into empty snowbanks to simulate resistance. He shifted constantly, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. German progress slowed to a crawl. By nightfall, the battalion had advanced less than a mile. As darkness fell and temperatures plunged, Reeves lay hidden beneath snow-covered brush, his fingers numb, his stomach empty, his body shaking with cold. German patrols moved through the forest, searching for what they believed was a well-concealed American platoon. Fear gripped the men, but Reeves held his ground. For the first time, the German advance was behind schedule, and the stranded rifleman was just getting started.
By 1500 hours on December 17, 1944, the snowfall intensified. Thick flakes drifted sideways through the Ardennes forest, reducing visibility to barely 50 yards. Sound behaved strangely in the cold. Rifle cracks echoed longer. Footsteps seemed closer than they were. From his concealed position beneath snow-laden branches, PFC Daniel Reeves watched the German advance unfold below him. It was massive. Long columns of infantry moved westward in disciplined formation, platoons spaced evenly, officers walking deliberately along the line. Behind them came heavier weapons, MG-42 machine guns dragged on sleds, mortar teams carrying crates of ammunition, runners moving back and forth with orders. Reeves counted carefully. At least 600 men. A full battalion. They were moving straight toward Elsenborn Ridge. Reeves waited until the lead scouts reached an open stretch of forest floor roughly 200 yards away. He slowed his breathing, rested the Garand against a tree trunk, and focused on a single figure, a German non-commissioned officer gesturing with his arm. Crack! The man collapsed instantly. Confusion exploded across the column. German soldiers dove for cover. Shouts echoed through the trees. MG-42 swung toward the tree line, firing long, sweeping bursts that shredded bark and kicked snow into the air. Reeves was already gone. He slid backward through the snow, crawling downhill for nearly 60 yards, then rose slowly behind a second tree line. From there, he fired again, dropping a machine gun assistant struggling to deploy his weapon. 2 shots. 2 kills. Total chaos. German officers ordered the column to halt. The battalion stopped moving.
By 1600 hours, the Germans began probing cautiously. Small squads fanned out, advancing by bounds, rifles raised. Mortar teams unlimbered their tubes, testing ranges into the forest ahead. Reeves exploited their caution. He fired single shots from widely separated positions, one from the north slope, another from the east, then silence. He waited several minutes between shots, creating the illusion of multiple American defenders coordinating fire. At one point, Reeves rolled a fragmentation grenade into an empty snowbank far from his actual position. The explosion echoed violently through the trees. German officers reacted immediately. They believed they were facing a concealed American platoon, possibly supported by artillery observers. Orders were revised. The battalion commander refused to advance blindly. Instead, German progress slowed to a crawl. By 1700 hours, the battalion had advanced less than 300 yards. Reeves' fingers burned with cold. Reloading the Garand took effort as his gloves stiffened. He flexed his hands constantly, aware that frostbite was creeping in. Still, he kept moving. At 1730 hours, German mortar fire began in earnest. The first rounds landed short, exploding harmlessly in the snow. Then the pattern adjusted. Explosions crept closer, walking through the forest in deliberate intervals. One shell detonated just meters away. The blast slammed Reeves into the ground. Snow and dirt filled his mouth. His ears rang violently. Pain shot through his shoulder as shrapnel tore through his jacket and into flesh. He gasped, teeth clenched, fighting the urge to cry out. blood soaked into the snow. Reeves tore a strip of cloth from his undershirt and wrapped the wound tightly, hands shaking from cold and shock. He forced himself to crawl, slowly, painfully, away from the impact zone. The mortars continued. Trees snapped, branches fell, the forest screamed. Yet Reeves survived, not through luck alone, but because he never stayed still.
Darkness swallowed the Ardennes early. By 1800 hours, night had fully closed in. Temperatures plunged toward minus 12 degrees Celsius. Reeves pressed himself beneath fallen branches, pulling snow over his helmet and shoulders until he blended almost perfectly into the forest floor. German patrols moved through the darkness. Boots crunched softly, metal clinked, voices whispered in tense, controlled tones. At one point, a patrol passed within 20 yards of Reeves' hiding place. One soldier stopped, scanning the shadows. Fear gripped Reeves. His heart hammered so loudly he was certain they could hear it. He slowed his breathing to almost nothing. After several agonizing seconds, the patrol moved on. But the search intensified. By 2000 hours, German commanders brought forward dogs. Their barking echoed unnervingly through the trees, sending cold fear straight through Reeves' chest. He smeared snow and dirt across his uniform, then crawled downhill to a frozen stream bed. He crossed it carefully, then doubled back uphill, breaking his trail. Once a dog passed within 10 yards, Reeves gripped his trench knife, ready to fight hand-to-hand if discovered, but the handler pulled the animal away. Reeves survived the night in brief, freezing intervals of half-sleep. His canteen was solid ice. Hunger gnawed at his stomach. His wounded shoulder throbbed relentlessly. Yet one thing mattered more than pain or fear. The German battalion still had not advanced. As midnight passed, Reeves checked his remaining ammunition. 4 clips left. Not much, but enough. The Germans would attack in force at dawn, and when they did, everything would change.
Dawn broke reluctantly over the Ardennes on December 18, 1944. A pale, lifeless gray light filtered through the forest canopy, revealing a battlefield scarred by explosions and churned snow. Smoke drifted between shattered trees. The temperature had dropped further overnight, nearing minus 15 degrees Celsius. Frost clung to every branch, every rifle barrel, every breath. PFC Daniel Reeves forced himself awake. His body protested immediately. His wounded shoulder burned with every movement. His fingers were swollen and numb. His boots felt like blocks of ice fused to his feet. He had not eaten in over 24 hours. But the sounds around him told him there was no rest. German voices carried clearly now, closer, more confident, more organized. Reeves slowly lifted his head, just enough to see through the branches. What he saw made his stomach tighten. The German battalion had not withdrawn. Instead, they had deployed for a systematic advance. Mortar pits were being prepared. Machine gun teams were in place to cover forest approaches. Rifle companies spread out in extended lines, advancing deliberately, clearing ground meter by meter. They were done probing. They were coming to crush whatever resistance lay ahead.
By 0800 hours, German infantry began advancing again. This time, there was no hesitation. MG-42s barked continuously, sweeping suspected American positions. Mortar rounds fell in tight patterns, saturating likely hiding spots. Infantry moved in bounding overwatch, one element advancing while another covered. Reeves knew he could not stop them, but he could still slow them. He crawled into position overlooking a narrow corridor between 2 low ridges, a natural choke point. When the lead German elements reached 150 yards, he fired. One soldier fell, then another. German fire responded instantly. Bullets ripped through branches above Reeves' head. Snow sprayed around him as he rolled downhill and disappeared. He reappeared moments later from a different angle, fired again, then vanished. To the Germans, it felt like coordinated resistance. To Reeves, it felt like survival measured in seconds.
At 0930 hours, a mortar round detonated dangerously close. The explosion slammed Reeves sideways. White light flashed in his vision. He hit the ground hard, gasping for air.
Pain flared across his ribs and leg as shrapnel tore through his trousers. Blood darkened the snow beneath him. Reeves bit down on his sleeve to keep from screaming. He knew he was badly hurt, but stopping meant death. He dragged himself into a shallow depression and wrapped his scarf tightly around his leg, cinching it until his hands shook. The pain was unbearable, but the bleeding slowed. German infantry moved closer. Too close. Reeves could hear their breathing now, the clink of gear, the scrape of boots on ice. A squad passed within 15 yards. Another followed. He pressed his face into the snow, heart pounding, praying the blood scent would not betray him. This was the moment. Everything seemed lost.
By 1100 hours, Reeves realized the truth. The Germans were no longer trying to push through. They were trying to surround him. 2 companies advanced from the north. Another element swung south. Mortars adjusted fire inward, tightening the box around his position. Reeves watched it happen from a ravine, his vision blurred by exhaustion and pain. He checked his ammunition. 3 clips left. That was all. Fear gripped him. Not panic, but a cold, steady understanding of how close the end had come. He had delayed them for more than a day, but now the battalion was adapting, and he was running out of time.
Darkness fell again. The second night was worse than the first. The temperature plunged further. Reeves' teeth chattered uncontrollably. His wounded leg throbbed. His hands were so numb he struggled to reload his rifle. German flares burst overhead, bathing the forest in harsh white light. Search parties advanced with bayonets fixed. Dogs barked constantly now, closer, angrier. Reeves crawled deeper into the ravine, pressing himself into frozen mud and ice. Several times he drifted toward sleep, only to jolt awake in terror. He whispered to himself, "Stay awake, stay alive." A patrol stopped directly above him, boots inches from his hiding place. One soldier laughed quietly. Another cursed the cold. A third stamped his feet. Reeves closed his eyes. Seconds passed. Then the patrol moved on. He exhaled shakily. Still alive, but barely.
Sometime after midnight, Reeves made a decision born of desperation. He would no longer merely hide. He would deceive. Using his remaining grenades, he rolled them into distant snowbanks, creating explosions far from his real position. He fired single shots from widely separated points, then shouted false commands into the darkness. "Second squad, fall back." The Germans interpreted the chaos as a coordinated American withdrawal. The battalion halted again. Hours passed. By the time dawn approached, German units were badly delayed, confused, and increasingly cautious. Reeves lay trembling in the snow, barely conscious. But unknown to the Germans, American reinforcements were moving, and the third day would decide everything.
The third dawn came without warmth. A dull gray light seeped through the Ardennes forest, revealing a landscape locked in ice and silence. Snow continued to fall, lightly but relentlessly, covering tracks, bodies, and shell craters alight. The temperature remained brutal, well below 15 degrees Celsius, and the wind cut through the trees like a blade. PFC Daniel Reeves did not rise when the light came. He lay curled against the frozen earth, barely conscious. His body shook uncontrollably. His wounded leg had stiffened overnight, the makeshift bandage frozen solid with blood and snow. His fingers were swollen and numb, barely able to grip his rifle. But the sounds around him forced his eyes open. German movement. Not probing, not cautious. This was something else.
At 700 hours, German artillery opened fire again. Mortar rounds crashed into the forest in tight, deliberate patterns. Trees splintered. Snow and earth erupted skyward. Shock waves rolled through the frozen ground, rattling Reeves' teeth and sending pain through his injured leg. This was no harassment fire. This was preparation. When the barrage lifted, German infantry advanced in force. not in scattered patrols, but in full battalion formation. Companies moved shoulder to shoulder through the trees. MG-42 machine guns fired continuously, stitching the forest with long bursts. Mortar teams advanced just behind the riflemen, ready to crush resistance at close range. Reeves watched in disbelief. They were coming straight at him. He dragged himself into a firing position overlooking a narrow forest corridor, a natural choke point between two low ridges. If the Germans passed here, nothing would stop them from reaching the road network leading to Elsenborn Ridge. Reeves checked his ammunition. 2 clips left. That was all. He waited until the lead elements reached 120 yards. Then he fired.
The first German fell. Then the second. Shouts erupted. MG-42 fire roared back instantly. Bullets snapped through branches inches above Reeves' head. Bark and snow exploded around him. He rolled downhill, vanished, then reappeared from another angle, firing again. To the Germans, it looked like multiple American positions engaging in coordination. To Reeves, it felt like running on fumes. His hands shook violently. Reloading took precious seconds as his fingers refused to obey him. His vision blurred from exhaustion and blood loss. At 10:30 hours, a grenade landed nearby. The explosion slammed Reeves against a tree. White light flashed in his vision. A sharp pain tore through his side as shrapnel cut into his ribs. He screamed, once, then bit down hard to stop himself. Blood soaked through his uniform. For a moment, he lay still, gasping. This was it. The thought came unbidden. This is where it ends.
German infantry pressed closer. A squad advanced within 30 yards, rifles raised, grenades clutched in gloved hands. Reeves could hear their breathing now, their boots crunching on ice. He forced himself upright, bracing the rifle against a tree, and fired again. Another German fell. The squad dropped to the ground, returning fire wildly. Reeves slid backward into cover, leaving a dark smear of blood in the snow. He crawled into a shallow foxhole abandoned earlier in the fighting and collapsed inside it. His chest burned. His leg throbbed. His hands were useless. Fear gripped him. Not fear of death, but fear that everything he had endured would mean nothing. Then, faintly, through the chaos, he heard something new. A distant rolling sound. Deep. Heavy. Artillery. American artillery. Not behind him. Ahead of him. The Germans heard it too. Their fire slowed. Officers shouted urgently. Movement stalled. Reeves lifted his head weakly. Reinforcements were close.
By 1400 hours, the German battalion was visibly disorganized. Officers argued, runners sprinted back and forth, casualties were dragged to the rear, machine gun teams repositioned repeatedly, unsure where the real threat lay. Reeves exploited every second. He fired his last shot sparingly, one round, then silence, another shot from a different position, then nothing. He shouted hoarse commands into the wind. Hold the line. The Germans hesitated. Again, unbelievably, one man, wounded, freezing, nearly out of ammunition, was still delaying them. As darkness approached, Reeves dragged himself deeper into the foxhole and curled into himself, shivering violently. He no longer felt his feet. He no longer felt his fingers. But he was still alive.
The third night was endless. German patrols continued to probe, but without the confidence of earlier days. They moved cautiously, wary of ambush. Reeves lay motionless, drifting in and out of consciousness. Faces flickered through his mind. His platoon, his family, men already lost to the forest and snow. Sometime after midnight, he heard engines. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Not German, American. Reeves allowed himself one fragile thought of hope. If he could hold until morning, everything would change.
The forest no longer felt alive. After 3 days of constant movement, gunfire, and pursuit, the Ardennes fell into an eerie stillness. Snow drifted lazily through the trees, settling over shattered branches, frozen bodies, and churned earth. The wind dropped, and with it the sounds of battle. PFC Daniel Reeves lay half-conscious in the shallow foxhole, his body barely generating enough warmth to keep his heart beating. His breaths came shallow and uneven. His uniform had frozen stiff around him, soaked with blood, sweat, and melted snow that had refrozen again and again. He had stopped feeling pain. That frightened him more than anything else. He tried to move his fingers. Nothing. Then, faintly, so faint he first thought it was imagination, he heard something new. A vibration. Low. Steady. Mechanical. Reeves pressed his ear weakly against the frozen ground. The vibration came again. Then again. Not the sharp metallic rattle of German half-tracks. Not the irregular coughing of enemy engines. This was heavier. Deeper. Tracked vehicles. American vehicles. Reeves' mind struggled to accept it. For 72 hours, every sound had meant danger. Now, for the first time, a sound meant hope. He tried to lift his head but collapsed back into the snow, vision blurring. Somewhere beyond the trees, American forces were moving forward. The Germans heard it too. Forward sentries of the 277th Volksgrenadier Division stiffened as the distant engine noise filtered through the forest. Officers were summoned. Field telephones were dragged forward. Runners moved urgently between companies. The battalion commander demanded reports. None made sense. The Americans were not supposed to be here yet. For 3 days, German intelligence had insisted that U.S. forces were collapsing westward. The resistance ahead was believed to be a stubborn but limited rearguard, perhaps a reinforced platoon delaying out of desperation. But now artillery engines were audible. Now infantry movement could be detected. Now the battlefield was changing. The battalion commander faced an awful realization. The delay had worked. By 0500 hours, German radio traffic intensified. Units reported movement to the west. Others reported American artillery registration fire. Mortar teams requested permission to displace. Confusion spread. For 72 hours, the battalion had been repeatedly halted, redeployed, and forced to sweep forests for a phantom American force that never seemed to disappear. The commander ordered one final probe forward. It never materialized. The sounds of American guns were growing louder. Without warning, the dawn shattered. American artillery opened fire with devastating precision. 105 and 155 millimeter howitzers, firing from behind Elsenborn Ridge, unleashed a rolling barrage that ripped through German assembly areas. Shells screamed overhead and detonated among trees and foxholes, sending bodies, equipment, and earth flying. Snow erupted in towering white columns. Trees were snapped like twigs. Shockwaves rolled through the frozen ground. German formations disintegrated. Machine gun nests vanished in explosions. Mortar crews were buried alive. Command posts were obliterated. Reeves felt the concussions roll through his body, even from his shallow foxhole. He pressed his face into the snow as debris rushed down around him. For the first time in 3 days, the Germans were no longer hunting. They were fleeing. American infantry followed closely behind the barrage. Elements of the 2nd Infantry Division advanced cautiously through the forest, rifles raised, bayonets fixed. Fresh troops from the 99th Infantry Division moved in support, re-establishing a continuous defensive line east of Elsenborn Ridge. They encountered chaos. German soldiers staggered through the trees, dazed and wounded. Some dropped their weapons and raised their hands. Others fled eastward without orders, abandoning equipment and comrades alike. The battalion, once intact, disciplined, and dangerous, had ceased to exist as a cohesive fighting force.
A squad from Company G, 2nd Infantry Division, moved cautiously along a ravine, scanning for stragglers. One soldier stopped abruptly. "Wait, over there." They approached slowly, rifles trained. Half buried in a foxhole,
lay a motionless American soldier. His uniform was frozen solid. His face was pale, lips blue. Snow clung to his eyelashes. A medic dropped to his knees instantly. "He's alive." "Barely." They shook Reeves gently. Hey, soldier. You're safe. We're here." Reeves' eyes fluttered open. He tried to speak. Only one word escaped his cracked lips. "Held." Then he slipped into unconsciousness. As the morning unfolded, officers began assembling reports. German positions captured. Abandoned weapons counted. Artillery logs reviewed. Patrol debriefs compared. The pattern was unmistakable. For 3 full days, a German battalion had been delayed, redirected, and ultimately neutralized by what commanders believed was a coordinated American defensive force. That force did not exist. There had been one rifleman, and his stand had altered the tempo of the entire northern sector. December 20th, 1944, late morning. By late morning, the forest east of Elsenborn Ridge was silent in a way only battlefields become silent. The gunfire had faded. The artillery had lifted. The engines that once echoed through the trees were gone. Snow continued to fall, settling gently over the wreckage left behind by 3 days of brutal fighting. Broken rifles lay half-buried in drifts. Shattered MG-42 tripods jutted from the snow like twisted metal bones. Frozen bodies marked where assaults had stalled and collapsed. The German battalion that had pushed relentlessly toward the ridge was no longer a battalion in any meaningful sense. Its advance had failed. For commanders of U.S. V Corps, reports from the front were almost unbelievable. The northern shoulder of the bulge, expected to bend or even break, had held firm. Elsenborn Ridge remained in American hands, and because of that, the entire German offensive began to unravel. Earlier that morning, a patrol from Company G, 2nd Infantry Division, had discovered something they did not expect to find. Deep in a ravine, beneath snow-covered branches, they found a foxhole. Inside it lay an American soldier. His uniform was frozen stiff. His face was pale and drawn. Ice clung to his eyelashes and eyebrows. For a moment, the patrol believed he was dead. Then he breathed. Barely.
A medic rushed forward, dropping to his knees in the snow. "He's alive," he said quietly. "Just barely." They checked his tags. PFC Daniel Reeves, Company E, 394th Infantry Regiment. When they tried to lift him, Reeves stirred. His eyes fluttered open. His lips moved. Someone leaned closer. "What is it, soldier?" Reeves swallowed with difficulty. His voice came out as little more than a whisper. "They didn't get through." Those were the last words he spoke before losing consciousness. As Reeves was evacuated westward toward Liège, officers began reconstructing what had happened in his sector. At first, it made no sense. German units had reported facing a reinforced American platoon. Some reports even suggested a company-sized element conducting a textbook delaying action. Patrols had been diverted, mortar fire redirected. Entire companies had been committed to search and destroy operations. But American unit logs showed something else. No platoon had been there. No company had been assigned. No defensive position had existed. Captured German documents told the rest of the story. For 72 hours, a single battalion of the 277th Volksgrenadier Division had been repeatedly halted, redeployed, and misdirected by what they believed to be organized resistance. The resistance was real. But it was only one man. German casualty figures from the battalion's after-action reports listed. Over 90 killed or wounded. Multiple MG-42 sections destroyed. Mortar teams rendered ineffective. Battalion command forced to withdraw without reaching its objective. The delay had been decisive. Had the battalion broken through even a day earlier, Elsenborn Ridge would have been vulnerable. Artillery positions might have been overrun. Supply roads exposed. The northern shoulder of the bulge might have collapsed. It did not. Reeves awoke again days later in a hospital far behind the lines. Doctors cataloged his injuries. Severe hypothermia. Frostbite affecting fingers and toes. Shrapnel wounds to shoulder, ribs, and leg.
extreme dehydration and exhaustion. One physician noted in his report, patient survived conditions incompatible with sustained life. Recovery took months. Reeves never fully regained sensation in several fingers. Cold weather would trouble him for the rest of his life. Like many veterans, he spoke little about what he endured. But his commanders understood. In February 1945, PFC Daniel Reeves was summoned to a quiet ceremony.
There were no cameras, no speeches. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the Purple Heart, a battlefield promotion to corporal. The citation stated, "Through extraordinary heroism and unwavering determination, this soldier delayed a battalion-sized enemy force for 72 hours while isolated behind enemy lines, directly contributing to the successful defense of Elsenborn Ridge." Reeves accepted the medal silently. When asked how he managed to hold out so long, he answered simply, "I didn't think about 3 days. I just thought about the next minute." Today, historians point to Elsenborn Ridge as one of the most critical defensive successes of the Battle of the Bulge. While German forces achieved temporary gains elsewhere, the northern shoulder never broke. The German timetable collapsed. Fuel shortages worsened. Momentum died. But beneath the arrows on maps and the movement of divisions lies a quieter truth. Wars are not only decided by generals and armies. Sometimes they are decided by one rifleman, one frozen forest, and one decision to stand fast. For 3 days, Daniel Reeves remained where no one expected him to remain, and because of that, an entire battalion failed. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to WWII Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.